Okay, so like luckily the rain person right now it's definitely for like jump right now it's you that people just wanna take photos of that the eliminated perceiving and basically put that intent to that eventually send that photo around the location coordinates of like the Squid Game Island one like jump over images to the Squid Game Island to jump over like that police chief and that way jump over is always sitting and hoping for like the police chief to definitely get break and then there is group team like and then the battalion of that will go to to that exact location coordinates of Instagram and would roughly what like Jungle with right now probably planning and focus. So like that way I'm talking correct roughly once like the march should be candidate like once like Jungle and his like team member was making it to that was to game and then like I'm looking like at that point Jungle only seeking like the help of like the definitely Jungle would be making it a priority to like keep like the part of the candidate trade. So like the claim to an example, then make the part to the candidate to that only lacking will show them the way to that exact location of that the Squid Game building within like the Squid Game Island. So they are like able to conduct so like from a remote distance itself, like once like Jamo and the team member will be seeing like the Squid Game building. Like at that point, second group like Jumbo telling that the to gain candidate to that to fight they come from the in like a nearby force that area in that stadium and so like Jumbo straight away telling like the constituent candidate to like hide there and basically until that they return back would be around the lines like Jumbo would be selling like the parking candidate and I'm looking like within this time period like I'm saying Jumbo will be probably will be having that of stage in like support of that park so like I'm doing that like Jumbo will be totally would be creating and that to a certain extent would be able to that would be creating like the injuries of like the pharmaceutical intent is like the financial and because like at that when I'm looking for like the fundamental properties that I'm looking for like definitely for like when project of like jump to send like the pharmaceutical candidate to that state you know in like the studio and at that point would be more likely to either like by then like the fuel in that scope like basically being like very low like one copy to that and so maybe like that attack due to that attack from like the shooting like and different like they are being a fuel leakage or like I'm just like the fuel in like the boat like they uh totally being so extremely less so like the fast shooting candidate would be better situation where like you will be having like in the boat would be having like enough fuel for like the fast shooting candidate to make it back to like the mainland towards the store either that or like the focus that I'm doing for let's say so the injuries of like the oxygen candidate like maybe like Junko telling that and reassure like the oxygen candidate that basically that Junko will be returning back the injury and like at that point like Junko will be safely getting like the oxygen candidate to like the main and will be along the lines of like an assurance that Junko will be doing for the oxygen candidate and Junko also telling that of like the fundamental Junko will be or making it to like the island and developing Junko sending like the location coordinate obvious to game and to like the policy. And that way, like, they probably have a phone call as well. Like the policy person is definitely going to get into like, after that, we'll be getting that confirmation that like the policy will be at that point during once like the policy will be getting the call from like, example, still to the development country by like the situation, like the policy will be like, the policy is in such an absolute shock. So like, exactly what that time, like, the policy would have made it to like the station and might have been in shock of like being like the red to being to that was destroyed had found from like the Portland Park home and all that. So that was an out of that notified. So definitely during this time that's when I'm different like China's phone call as well would be happening. And basically at that point that the will give that assurance to like so that like uh is safety that would be as soon as possible will be with like an huge battalion of like one of people are going to head off to like the game island. And so like that way Jumbo get that confirmation and like so just straight away assure like that was the candidate that like backup could be arriving to documents great delay which we until then for like the pumpkin candidate to like state them in like the in like the studio minus the along the lines of the like Janko would be telling to like that pumpkin candidate and like the pumpkin candidate will be agreeing. So like in that then Janko along with that to the team member of that Janko like and like then making their preparation to like the studio meeting and so the like during that consideration of the police the preparation like totally attempt that totally failing and I'm looking that in that preparation works like I'm looking like that team member of that Django eventually getting eliminated and like Django will be and I'm totally putting that info by now 40 those of that basically the incoming that like the bottom part has been eliminated. So like jump. So that lead info will be only info will know will be only expecting that an eventual infiltration in possible infiltration to like this video thing like jump on screen. So definitely people will have that finally not like it will have given to give up the order to Squid workers to like eliminate or thing on the black who is the black jungle but to that with jungle alone and in the same kind of like figure in the line from the different that people will be giving that order to like the speaking of like the scenario that I'm showing you, right? So like that we are focusing that thing that inspiration in terms of that jungle and that thing on the next game but then like eventually them getting outnumbered and spawned by other the game of and that went up to like the that game of like asking that after jump on his team member after that which one among them is like jump and that point that jump out one like jump out is saying that him that instantly that the team member of that jump out will be getting eliminated by that stupid method that scenario that and that jump out we take a man to people that kind of like situation within like the studio building is like more like the possible scenario which is also scenario that I'm little and my Korean message that during this time, like the situation was that San John, that everyone that as well as like in these that most likely definitely still in a matter of time that the tower like definitely able to bring that then we don't like doing it like absolute maximum to like separate San John from like the baby and able to connect regardless of and then to bring that into the like even telling San John to that probably to that for like Sanjay to that fight that one versus one fight against that Bendigo guy and let the serving person that let the winner tweet the lady to their own line and let them go like maybe telling and then also back in the scenario that of the thing. But like regardless of how many less Bendigo guy who be trying to like convert that Sanjay to like separate itself from like the baby like I'm Sanjay. In this earlier a few symbols like Sanjay Sanjay is okay right connecting to that everything connected to like Bendigo guy or the instead of the like the mass connected to like Bendigo guy and like Jumpy and everything like the fact that like the Bendigo guy had like probably abandoned Janti that even while Sanjay was like willing to like skip out and basically to go back and save Janti like the fact that like when the guy was like remaining sign up to like the studio of like his jump and everything that totally like Sanjay was there not remembering all the time Sanjay was the topic was still like when the guy at that point and basically so like when the guy will be saying all sorts of like life for like why exactly he did that and the like when the guy telling Sanjay that he it was all like them doing that consciously doing that and like them doing that prioritizing the baby like safety of his like baby over like chanting when the guy telling Sandra that basically the when the guy had like attempted to like save chanting then like then the guy couldn't have survived that the Squid Game and that day like then the guy couldn't be able to like make it this far and couldn't be able to like lead up for like the baby and to protect like the baby along the lines of the like even while then the guy will do that after my point to like Sanjay like still Sanjay will be remembering that like that point where like Gandhi had placed all that hopes on landed leave was that confidence in like Sanjay for being there for like the baby like Sanjay will remember that incident from the past where like and like the faith of like Janti and then Sanjay will begin getting that from that feeling that basically Janti faith that absolute belief in like Sanjay and basically that was exactly what like Janti wanted and so that was like when like the very last switch of like Janti like before like what is education and everything. So definitely I'm concerned remembering all this and basically Gandhi this down to be getting that from that feeling that basically that like the right decision would be for like Sanjay to be like the one to like take care of the baby. So there are the line like Sanjay to be coming down to such a strong decision. At that point, like with another thing. And at that point, I would bring like the different guy being set up, so that would be the attempt to like convince Sanjay to like separate himself from like the baby failing like the everyone guy. By that point, I'm considering time would be very less like the scenario that I'm like time would have run off to the point of like maybe only 30 seconds. It would be remaining at that point for like the individual like the scenario that I'm looking at, and that point of the like the guy did would be able to in the first training and then raise and then like the guy picking up like the ball and that point is like the scenario that I'm right. and like picking up the phone and threatening Sanjon to that case and telling Sanjon that it's the Sanjon's like last chance to like separate himself from like the baby. To get on line like the different guy to the threatening Sanjon. It's like the scenario that I'm on the brain. And at that point, Sanjon was in the range will be totally shocked and like will be shocked on seeing like the that absolute pro colors. This is what I'm considering at that point. That would be happening for like when you go guy with like by then I was bring like in 20 seconds around in the so like at that point I was bring like then you can guy probably that even extremely selfish man or that selfish and realistic man or like prioritizing himself even over like the baby as like this is like the scenario that I'm looking and that way like then become guy like only deciding to have himself alone in that win like and survive like the students and even the money in the end of the line of that final realistic decision that one guy at that point, towards like that final moment while 20 seconds alone with the remain is like the scenario set up again. That way, like even though such pro separate screen struggle, like still I'm moving that in to be strongly hunting within like Benjamin guy. So like I'm feeling like still that Benjamin guy will be struggling and then Benjamin guy picking up get the ball and I'm feeling like Benjamin guy attacks on him. And I'm talking about like with that beach attack by like Benjamin guy on like Sanjay was like the ball like Sanjay will be like ensuring to like totally uh, keep like the baby well protected. This is like the scenario that I'm looking. So that the friend that way that Sanjay getting more and more badly injured and stuff by that of that then you can die and that while always looking at me like the screens of like baby repeatedly getting hurt by like then you can die as well. It's like the scenario that I'm looking until like I'm looking that until like I'm different second I don't make the remaining like then you can buy into finally getting fed up and then you can buy would be thrown away then support and would be that so to be that realizing what he has become like the kind of monster like then you can buy has become that basically that things of some baby that can like injury to be causing that case within like then you can buy to get to such extreme levels that I'm like that you can buy will be feeling so extremely bad about himself but the kind of person he has ended up and basically that can become like at that point would be that would be like feeling as like anyone at that point would be feeling as if like not in worthy of like asking for like forgiveness to that scenario. So like I'm looking like then the guy without even saying a word like walking towards like the edge of the tower and like basically the while only 2 seconds alone remaining like then the guy would be from like the edge of the tower would be turning back and looking at Sanjay and basically uh, wouldn't even be saying anything at all to Alexander and maybe that computer guy at that point getting eliminated. Like the scenario right at that very last single second, like I'm doing like the Benjamin guy getting eliminated suddenly. And that way, like finally at that very final moment of like Benjamin guy, that basically Benjamin guy taking a self-less position and basically deciding to finally prioritizing that the baby and like the safety of like, the baby. Uh, even more than the guy. And basically that way, like so that way, like the people guys and that very last one final last second. Just like the scenario that I'm looking at the name friends. And also for the friends somewhat by 2 seconds around will be remaining and that the individual guy will be turning that on like the edge of like the looking back from like the edge of like the tower at like Sangyon as badly and extremely injured Sangyon that holding on to with such effort care onto that the baby of like the individual guy. Like at that point I'm seeing that fight itself that will be making the individual guy realize that how much of that should does exist within like Sangyon that day then at that point will be having that sort of realization and the strong feeling that was really that conflict KB will be way better off that basically throwing up with like Kangyon than like Tenjigan like say that side of like the badly injured like Kangyon like taking that much care of that Tenjigan guy's KB that basically even while that the baby doesn't belong to that Sangyon like the fact that Sangyon takes so much growth to such extreme extent to that so we protect like the baby and all of that like basically lab would be totally to be given that final realization and an awakening of that kind of realization to that Pentagon guy. It should give what like resulting in that Pentagon guy totally feeling ashamed of himself and basically Pentagon guy at that point, so that Pentagon guy that so even he finally at that very last moment that still Pentagon guy when feeling flat to understand that basically that like on once like Pentagon guy that when he get that strong feeling that like this baby is in like safe hands, safe good hands. That's the with scenario, and that way would be how that then guided that very last second would be like getting eliminated. It's like that eventual scenario that I'm looking at chance. And at that point, probably like for like Sangyong and actually need to be declared like the winners of like within 24 games. And at that point, but for that, the VIP score me think that easily that so like that years like the 24 years like student and they also like at that point, bring that the frontman of we select like the VIPs that really uh that like like a surprise for them and like I'm thinking like the frontman of the the room of the VIPs at that point is like big now and then like the VIPs getting that as the something surprise like them seeing like the frontman walking toward like that like stage where like the point game would have taken place and where like Ryan Jones as well as very good like very good up and down like they're like into bring that the prominent will be showing up and like it will be taken off like the mask and like like at that point would be telling Sanjay about that I will be having a lot of dialogue with like Sanjay and like that will be on professor like it was like situation of sitting the web attention that like it was situation would be like in both and has like since like info had given up one of its like kidneys and like the past to its like jump and that they have been like so since info only have a single kidney like I'm putting the situation of the COVID most likely info might have had like might be having different sort of like and should take this like kidney and so that way that that situation of info like the person might be like info not having much time left might be the case of the phenomenon for energy. So definitely with like the boardman path as well as like the back of the guy as well as like cleanup as well bond like it. When like the league might be permission for like the officer like from New York at eliminated like might definitely not brought to be an extra game in the league product might definitely not brought to be the case of being integrated. So only the reason for that that individual around being given that second highest position after that input like command function of like the position of like the might be so due to that that person having that team of experience or like that of like that person that individual having either the most experience or like he might have been that he that's performing student worker for like a great number of years. It's definitely a position that way like like might have decided to like give that individual an upgrade of that to that of the position might be it's like only 1% of that and so the positive that is for like since like while getting Sanjon up to end up like Sanjon has and then what project in since like Sanjon is different in like the related reports with like and that is since like when you that like Sanjon started even during entering like the 24 students work like that we like the online like so we have to do that it might have been a back strategy of that the online info to have that another studio workup wearing like the kind of like similar that mask as well as like the black uniform of the requirement. For like maybe like considering like the worst case scenario, if like Sandor pulls off like something surprising and then we still manage to like make it towards like the permanent even that at that point that for like permanent hope to be able to like and get away from like Sandor at that point would be definitely more like it's some sort of like an impression of something that some sort of plan somehow managed from like the word outside like Squid Game had an iron like usually it's become some sort of like a suspend that with that the from man hope she gets into trouble like at that point of like a back gradually strategy that the different like maybe the from man might have created the slow poster of like the officer with that even giving that individual that similar kind of like mask as well as less uniform black inside uniform to that the command might be the case to like develop of the current industry. So that but yeah, still my premise is that like both the package guy as well as airport might actually be like the active sons of that and might be the basic development trend. So yeah, like unlike in whole like the package guy might not be so an exclusive winner. Won't be the case of remembering might be the reason for like package guy kind of like having so much of like jealousy in like the past like before like the package guy like showing so much of like kind of like jealousy towards like Sanjay. And you also due to the fact that Sanjay being like an good game winner, which like would be something that the Rakhi guy might have been desiring so much, but might have definitely not have been able to live because like, the Rakhi guy look at him might be having that much of like a fear of like basically entering and playing like and playing like those games might be the case of him and that might be how he might have became like the batting guy. and might have ended up only being able to like play just like the Latin game alone. Might be the case, especially might be very interesting. So definitely still like up to something like Janko, I mean like Info might have badly wanted the Latin guy in like the past might have badly wanted after like from man like and like Info might have badly wanted like the Latin guy to eventually become just like such a and to like eventually enter and by eventually entering and playing like this game and something like the winner plus like the play while in a might at the back like gave at the position of like the front man to like info which might have been the play after like info might have won like the 20 games to info won like the 20 games so like the play and that one thing that one other thing that in might have even thought info might have been that and eventually as time passes and eventually what like info will be eventually passing that baton to another individual to another like to get that basically at that point for like to that make sure that like that most important role gets followed and that most important role will be the need of that tournament to definitely that like should be only when someone who has entered and played and wants like the student alone who's like only serving to like around like this Indian will be along the lines of that absolutely my basis just definitely my friend which the original creator of like the Squid Games 99 Squid Games might have passed on to like Ilnapo might have been like the winner of like the 1999 Squid Games and like definitely Ilna might have passed that down that road to like phone with that info and basically Ilna might have so like Ilna might have been always seeing like the poor packaging guy as like such an absolute failure as well might be the case definitely remembering solely due to the fact of like packaging guy not being courageous to like play and win like the student might be the case with definitely a continuous insurance might be the case definitely remembering so yeah like info might have not given up hopes in like the packaging guy and might have wanted to the packaging guy to like see to eventually face like civilians and become like winner of the civilians. Because like if I might have had that absolute confidence in like the activity I didn't like do it. If only he was able to like build up such a race and basically to push himself to like end up into the civilians. Maybe along the lines like the older brother the continuing like the activity older brother like might have wanted and might have moved and hope might have been the case. So the Sanjay eliminating that battery guy and taking away for that hope that improved that eventually and the next plan of that info might have been definitely to totally rely on like the boardman part. So it might definitely be an experience when to lack the places lack info upon the person might be not having much time left like info might have placed also on that basically usually having like the boardman part that want to like you know they want to like have like the government pass like around like the again for like a few more years since like the government pass it's like uh, kind of like it's in the old as well still I'm like also might have had that hopes that basically even within that few years like the government pass might be only able to while running like it might be only able to like find a younger successor might be along the lines like info might have had that hope so like the government path as well due to that Sangyong and Janto and all the plans that getting eliminated like and like more right now like the person would be not having much time left and so would be not going to desperate that to because like the biggest goal in that in life would be to like have like the students like which that you know is that learning that basically flourish even and more and be that always to feel like the best produces like this games that taking place and like a lot of countries to like have that was the game taking place in that with the country that like the think is like running to be like the best in this league even if that yeah info won't be able to like around like games forever like still even if it's in also like happens still for info until it was very last breath to be able to like to everything in his power to like ensure that basically like there's like higher that will be that would run like the skill games of like and would be taking like the skill games of that would go to like even going to learn to like even greater heights like this might be like the only highest priority and for in that in most life might be the basic implementation might be the reason for like for totally like in another manner like the continuing for skill games like having multiple times help Sanjon out. Even though initially it might have been to that get revenge on Sanjon for like the elimination of that, but it was like the end after the match might have been the case. And that might be the reason for like that Ponce's league might have definitely like got a like Sanjon that got from Janbe to that enter into like second for civilians along with like Sanjon as well. Might be definitely that actually that to like totally get revenge on like Sanjon by simply having like putting Sanjon into that situation of like losing Janbe. And that might be the reason for like even doing that and while ensuring that elimination of that Janbe happens right in front of that Sanjon that might have been in revenge might be the case that we went through. Yeah, like after that, like basically, yeah. So like up to that point, like it was like one might have been talking on to that one like it was like might have been talking on farm, but like with like farm as well having been eliminated like something like it was like only for might be from that point on like info might have been feeling so situated afraid that like info might have said may even forgiven Sandron and it was like only for from that point on might have been to definitely have Sanyo be the next sire and pass on the background to like Sanyo might be one like so right out like since then might be the case definitely not correct and until before like past government back to end this like it was plan might have been to that only to somehow get Sanyo towards like the finals and then like of like the dungeon was to games and at that point like for like Sanyo for it was to definitely make that against to like Sanyo that like so like the permanent basically to stop all that suffering of that betrayal and everything to like Sangyong and basically that maybe for like info to like take on Sangyong in like the final six game and basically for like info to like eliminate Sangyong in like this game might have been what like info might have planned is like a possibility that I'm nothing particular basically might have planned is definitely one of the things but like with like part six elimination like info might have totally got the split and so info might have changed all that plans and might have whether they kind of way to select to reflect on John and due to that interest and desperation of like going to might have the prey to like have San John run like the games and be the next successor and basically once like the baby as well Jadis baby as well was like born like at that point like they were like info might have been to that more like hopeful that basically at that point who might have start planning that basically to have like along with Alexandra, like the baby as well, and that's the like the winners of that different experience so that like info that way before info time turns out like info would be able to like ensure that not only a single successor but like two successors for like the students of that info. Since like Sanya was that kind of that whole exactly like info that basically like the fact that like now after like so judges maybe like basically even if that Sangyong is like old like basically eventually once like they push like to that way if we made of that way by ensuring that element like Sangyong like behavior still brings the students and by then like within that time to that target spoil like Sangyong I told you so that like once like Sangyong element like training without want like the 20 students at that point for like so to electorally manipulate and get Sangyong to like around like Squid Games from 2024, 2025. And basically, eventually, once like the grows up and turns into like another to have like the babies take it from there and basically from like the Squid Games from that point on. If they along the lines like might have planned, might have been totally feeling hopeful of supplement friendships. Yeah, like so definitely Sangyong. It's mainly all part of like this like theory and person of mine that basically like the reason for like invoking that unfair advantage of that weapon after like the game to that Sangyong and that even with that unfair advantage of like using that of that authentic Sangyong to like use the weapon to like eliminate like the many game candidates who had won like the first two game and all that. That might be due to all that might be due to situations, especially in friends. So definitely by the preemption right now is that basically according to my difference of one's like Sandro along with like the baby to be enough to then like the winners of like the sixth game and basically that way becoming the winners of like 22 more games like at that point I'm looking for like the when I go from my brain and telling like to the appears that like wait that they have one more suffering and basically at that point like the permanent code showing up to like in the permanent scheme like basically the permanent is showing up toward like web Sandro and like the baby to being declared as like the winners of the series and they're like consider like having that conversation with like Sanjay or like Info would be totally trying to definitely manipulate Sanjay to like get Sanjay to like side along with like Info and run like sequence from related by so if on the spring like will be totally calling out Sanjay on like how much of that would be answer Sanjay a lot of questions that to that basically now Sangam realized that this lean was like right all along about humanity and everything would be along the lines of the would like it would be asking Sangam and basically info would be like calling out all the Sangam's journey. The thing Sangam did like Sangam's journey like when it was look like Sangam had like betrayed and destroyed his own ideology and by eliminating the hope as well as Sangam for the even while rejecting the weapon that info had given to that Sangam uh, in that and later the name of the candidates after the school game we still like the fact that Sangam still used that unfair advantage of that weapon to survive and eliminate the school game candidates in the school game as well. Uh, would be along the lines of info with Alexander who's very sense Sangam to have basically showed up to the 2024 games to capture the tournament info as well as to the beginning of the 2024 games was trying to lead the Squid Games by saving all the as much as Squid Game candidates as we could in this very same example in the Indian conscious of ideology and eventually Squid Game even using the unfair advantage of the weapon that info had given to someone to eliminate the very few remaining Squid Game candidates and basically this is Squid and even ending up becoming the winner of the 2024 games by showing all the elimination of the Squid Game candidates actually usually along the lines of becoming it will be telling Sangyeon that and it will be telling Sangyeon along the lines that that Sangyeon is expecting info and should be that still villain signature and that selfishness and should be all coming out of has of came out of Sangyeon exactly like it was well when situation got desperate. Would be along the lines it will be telling Sangyeon and it will be telling Sangyeon that basically now the Sangyeon realized that basically right all along to be along the lines it will be asking Sangyeon. But at that point definitely Sanjay will be talking back to about and probably will be telling how extremely wrong it was that ideology stuff that Sanjay still even to the present even while Sanjay has done all those wrong things his knees that Sanjay still believes that Sanjay at that point is only putting back the blame for on info that basically was info and info Squid Games that have basically destroyed Sanjay's life and not only Sanjay's life but the life of the proper life that all these singing candidates all the way back to see what all the singing candidates the proper life that they have maintained usually the it was basically having destroyed the proper job and basically that they destroyed their life and having and lured up into the skin games and basically for the opportunity aspects that they have been showing a favor to the Squid Games and the women's Squid Game candidate that would be along the lines of doing Sandra at that point responding back to info and he would be telling that it was all this is info sport alone would be along the lines of Sandra would be accused of info at that point certainly don't trend. So at that point I was looking info would be thoroughly getting disappointed in Sandra. So definitely I'm looking info at that point would be deciding to the next thing that won't be totally at that when we entering then go with the plan B and that will be most likely true. So that way after by saying all this in whole bit for us telling Sangyeon or asking Sangyeon to basically to join hands with info and basically for them both to around the Squid Games from 2025 and basically to have eventually the same future once the baby grows up to be another that that person become structure and around Squid Games Western future okay along the lines of info would be telling Sangyeon and Sangyeon at that point will be feeling getting extremely embraced on fear more that from both personas that would say after saying all this until Sangyeon responding back and saying all this thing sign to info and accusing info has the role villain and basically and the reason for all this and everything Sangyeon did and all that at that point I'm definitely info getting disappointed in Sangyeon and basically at that point he's going to plan B and that would be to info straight away challenge Sangyeon to an extra final to give between just Sangyeon and Info alone. And basically Info will be placing that bet against Sangyeon that basically with Sangyeon and that will be for a 1 versus 1 fight between Sangyeon and Info. And if Sangyeon wins then Info will stop the skill game But like it's Sanjay was like there will be absolutely no elimination at all. But like if Sanjay loses to like info, then Sanjay would have to like listen to like info and we would have to like team up and like on like the students from 2025 and would have to like yes, Sanjay would have to like promise that they will be in like the 20s of once like then steady grades up and stuff like around like that person like will be eventually becoming like the successor of like Sanjay and will be running like that just by chance of the like would be like the bet that I'm doing like info would be making to like Sanjay and that would be such an absolute shock for like Sanjay who will be at work seeing that comes such a scenario in the exactly by the reality. So that this will be such and narrative twist and surprise to like the episode we watching this especially on direction that we will be getting see later. That point is like the scenario setting. And in that way like I'm coming like the one with one fight between like Sangyeon and Info to decide like the future of like the Squid Games as well as like Sangyeon has been as like the real happening like it's like the scenario that I'm doing. That way like the one was one fight sitting next Sangyeon and Info it's like the scenario that I'm bringing in and according to my description, that way, like I'm different like once like the sun versus info fight would be doing itself like a different like straight away fight aspect of fight begins itself like it will be info that will be straight away start or for Tuesday or for sun is like different after that about it. So like the feel that fight like a different like a sun would be having more of a trust on the info than like even like the MgCoinGuy is like this scenario that way like a different like the baby would be like for the sun would be separating himself from like the baby and baby and then only Sangyong will be that having this like finding again against like this like the scenario that I'm looking for. So until that final studio will be over like Sangyong only putting again separating it from like release like the scenario that I'm looking for. Yeah, like I'm looking like about like the fight between like Sangyong and Ringo would be doing them definitely Ringo will be straight away offering Sangyong and I'm looking like while offering Sangyong like and like fight with me like I'm looking like Ringo repeatedly that we'll be talking about this ideology and basically how we will figure it down with like Sangyong's like definitely down that theory that so lying with the info even while it would be definitely holding on to his like ideology which would have been like the brilliance with ideology passed down by him to like info down like that might or makes it that would within like info which will be creating that disturbance with the info. So certainly due to that reason, like if even while info be desperate trying to quote unquote ideology, like Sangyong's like against like most ideologies would be reflect Sangyong's ideology of like would be probably easily considering being able to like create that increase that disturbance within like info. It's definitely by the brand. So like info with the author and Sangyong like in that platform of the final studio like like info would be telling would be trying like force Sangyong to like accept that basically info's ideology is like the right center of ideology. It's like the scenario that I'm doing and that fight so this again like movement to this room that's repeated dialogues of like info about like info's ideology. Like the like info would be repeatedly telling Sangyong how like info's ideology is like the right ideology and like Sangyong's ideology is like the wrong ideology and for Sangyong to like accept the truth that like imposters lack the right and this level this way. But like I'm sorry, eventually that in a point where like I'm eventually Sanjom getting fed up and will be getting still encouraged hearing that extreme strong and realistic ideology of like info will be making at that point is like the scenario that I'm in. That like that taken point of like the race of like Sanjom like I'm taking like Sanjom being able to like change the tide of like, the whole fight between like Sanjay and Mikhail. And I'm looking like Sanjay that way making it come back towards like that fight and like eventually Sanjay complete like or defeating info that thing with an art that I'm doing. And that being such an absolute shock for like the audience that was an art that you're going to like. Yet like I'm looking like Sanjay definitely not eliminated info but like Sanjay would be totally thoroughly dedicated into like scenario that I'm controlling and like at that point like Simpo would be badly dedicated and on the floor and at that point like Sanjay would be walking back and like would be saying how like that basically that doubt love like Simpo understand like how strong Simpo is and really Sanjay will be once again saying this ideology to like into and at that point like Simpo like confident man of some and everything would be totally getting destroyed and basically before we only feeling like sad and disappointed and frustrated. At that point, supplements rings and without like info won't be having time left is also like on my different ambition. So definitely at that point is when I was current like jump off to be point showing up to that exact location. And I was like an entire battalion like police officer who would have by then made it to and infiltrated into like the Squid Game building and might have taken out like the Squid Game of the permanent Squid Game of the and like the Squid Game building by then and might have that way reached Jambon and that way like all of them make it to that location where and like to this openly saying like a dictated info lying on the floor with like Sangyong standing right there and basically it's like the William Tanari that I'm going to bring them train. And I'm also going to invite them like an like through like the infiltration of like the Fish battalion of like police officer different that the different like while like the Sangyong while like the is will be totally focused on like the fight between like Sangyong and at that point like the police officers like basically making it to like the room of like the VIPs and even capturing like the VIPs and like so like on like the and that battalion was like all the student battalion of like was up to make it to like the location where like Sangyong and in whole the fighting the John as well as like the VIPs as well in captivity only with some like different arms that and different. So by then, like Sanjay would have defeated Info, and I'm looking like at that point, like Info probably seeing John probably seeing Info, and I'm looking like at that point, like Info did only feeling as if like he has absolutely nothing left, he has absolutely lost it all, and Info did only feeling absolutely sad at this point, and frustrated. So at that point, Sanjay telling Info that basically that this is the end, this is the end of that Info, and Info's next games. The yellow line like Sanjong at that point would be just off back to that. So that really creates a thoroughly repeated in most like the scenario that I did. So like that way at that point I'm remembering like with like info maybe like at that point like info told me getting eliminated exactly like how like the battle guy got eliminated. Is that doing the scenario that I'm going to do. So like info at that point not being able to like handle that loss, that failure and that acceptance of the truth setting in life info only getting eliminated in such a manner. It's like the possibility that I'm looking over that like one possibility that I'm putting, the other possibility that I'm putting is for like that may not happening and like even though it won't while it won't be only still I'm looking at jump on like the police you're like making it in time and basically them capturing and asking and taking away info is that the very good other possibility and like the possibility that I'm looking. So like the optimal premises through that location coordinate to send the for an example of eventually sending to that the police chief like like huge police battalion like showing up to like the Spigam Island and like even before they were showing up and making it to like the Spigam Island and the bring like a scenario where like Captain Bro who would have been such as naturally might have been such as big front like pop like and from that after like so realizing about like path of elimination and like Captain Bro basically feeling extremely frustrated and enraged and deciding to like get revenge on like the uh, on like Janko and team who would have been eliminated to have eliminated like path would be along the lines of the like definitely and like Captain Doe would be that fixing in his mind is definitely memories and that way like even before like the backup of like the battalion which have to like speak game and then that if the Indian before that will be shown up to like speak game and that have to side this is to like get revenge on jump point thing like the scenario that I'm thinking. But like I'm looking like once like Captain Go will be showing up to next game and like about like I'm like scenario to be like according to my preparation that the path to the candidate of that voice will be according to like John so almost will be staying hidden in like that game. I then like I'm also like at that point like seeing was like random person like showing up to like this game island just like about like I'm bring at that point basically like the poor and innocent for Korean candidate without realizing who Captain Pope is like and like him only rushing towards like that government and basically it would be pleading to that government uh to get the Palestinian candidate pleading to that government to like get him as soon as possible back to like the mainland and like that he would be saying that like and it would be begging for that help at that point to Captain Go like the scenario that I'm going to like during that first interaction I'm like Captain Go will be like realizing that basically that the past winning candidate is like an escapee winning candidate with like the scenario that I'm thinking. So like at that point I'm going to bring like the realistic Captain Go eliminating like the past winning candidates. So it's like the scenario that I'm thinking. That way like I'm putting like when Jumbo would be returning back after like uh to the post legs after like maybe capturing and arresting uh info or like the account of the other possibility like info getting eliminated again like after like shutting down like the game building and once like along with like the after battalion like once like the whole year turned back like at that point like Japo getting that absolute biggest shock of like basically uh of like realizing that like the past winning candidate has been eliminated as like the scenario that was involved. But like I'm saying, like even before that like the past winning candidate will be taking that jump off and the stream about to like this again I remember so like the past winning candidate will be uh, going on and on about like how like the past winning candidate is like okay extremely worried for his like thought and everything. So definitely that interaction like the past winning candidate like under the telling example about like the name of like the hospital is like daughter is and like all that is so that way like I'm like at that point like Janho the point my premise like finally like seeing like the internet seeing again like Janho because he's been absolutely and extremely guilty and feeling extremely bad. So like at that point I'm looking like Janho totally remembering like the words of like the past feeling candidate and that way like Janho straight away will be rushing back to like the mainland and basically like Janho will be straight away going up to like that hospital and will be paying for like the Palestinian candidates left out of left surgery, and basically that way that were getting safe, and basically then like I'm looking that the final events scenario being like Sanjyon that the daughter of left country growing up with like Sanjyon, foreign Sanjyon, her father, and basically the daughter of like the Palestinian candidate like growing up with like Jump and seeing Jump as her father is like changing scenario, possible scenario that I'm looking on I'm not for him. Okay, so like the theme of the play I'm looking right now is for like the MgCoinGuy like going through the narrow platform, going up to like the third tower and basically picking up like the pole and basically pressing like the timer and the MgCoinGuy doing all this like while Sanjon will be walking through that narrow platform. Uh, while holding them on to like the rail and walk through that narrow platform towards like the third tower is like the scenario that I'm doing. So like the moment while MgCoinGuy will be pressing the timer on the different like the platform to like the narrow platform to the public start to like slowly recede. It's like the scenario that I'm looking over today. So like the length of like the narrow platform like decreasing that is like the narrow platform like entering back into like the third tower that from the like the scenario that I'm looking over right. So like Sandro will be like probably getting worried at that point and like at that point like with like the Indian guy standing on the third platform while holding on to like the pole facing Sangyong would be telling Sangyong to not only to tie the baby onto that pole. It's like the scenario that I'm looking of the body. While like the and to do that while like the platform would be receding so that before like the platform will be receding to like tie like the baby, say like the pole would be or like then individual guy with the telling Sangyong. So that the individual guy at that point would be making that absolute threat to like Sangyong. And I'm going initially I'm going to lead of being it and like the platform is really creating more and more. And like with that then we going by like holding on to like the ball and pointing like the ball towards like Sanjon won't be able to like enter forcefully enter into that by holding on to the baby won't be able to like forcefully enter into like the third platform either. It's like will be the situation of Sanjon at that point like scenario that I'm looking at. Yet like the bowling is Sanjon will be hitting more like and like Sanjon then at that point like totally seeing like the facial expression of like the which as well will be totally like in a non-confident and lack of worry facial expression that was like then guy will be desperately trying to fight like the scenario from Sangyeon's like the scenario that I'm thinking. So like definitely at that point like Sangyeon's like confidence raising and like facial expression as well turning serious and basically at that point like Sangyeon not listening to like the Newton guy while like the platform will be slowly proceeding like Sangyeon like holding on tightly holding on to like the rail and basically like refusing to like listen to like the Newton guy and like the and will be staying in that narrow platform. Sangyeon is still staying at like that narrow steering platform at that point that we can have for him. So like once like the so like that will be getting like the Newton guy sees even more worried for agreeing to like the scenario that I'm getting. So like as like the platform will be extremely irritating. Like at that point, I'm looking at and as like that the situation would be like it's I'm looking at that point for like situation be being such that they believe that the narrow platform is getting to like the point of like like Sanjay not being able to like stay on like the narrow platform much longer that but to eventually end up doing like other situation. So, so like at that point, like then guy totally getting desperate and being so worried and they will be perfect area. And at that point, I'm looking at an enraged one guy that throwing like the force away and basically quickly grabbing like Sangyon's arm and basically putting Sangyon along with like the baby. from like the narrow platform to like the third tower is like the scenario that I'm looking at. And that then the guy in an enraged manner will be trying to like separate, forcefully separate like the babies and then John Jones like the scenario. At that point, the like scenario that I'm saying. No matter how much like force like the guy will be using like and San John will probably persisting all of that and basically would be holding on to like the baby and won't get all giving up like the baby at that point. It's like a scenario that I'm looking at. And at that point is when I'm basically like the and the guy probably will be deciding to like basically and like with like the timer at that point what the everything will be going on. So like at that point like then become guy looking at the timer like I'm looking like then become guy deciding to like probably to properly like try to like manipulate and that way convince and trick and convince Sankyons to like give up like the baby. Would be along the lines like then become guy at that point would be decided and from that point on it would be attempting it's like the scenario that I'm something and my different version. Okay, so like the playment preemption right now, the plan is in San John, we are partly misunderstanding like the actual plan affected because like this would be only to that eliminate San John and for him along with that they will to that win like the Squid Game and for then the guy to that lead the Squid Games along with like the money and like the baby would be definitely like saying the guys like current plan, but definitely my generation, which like San John will be totally misunderstanding might be the actually affect situations definitely not training. So but game was bring that the MgCoinGuy right now. So like I'm bring right now tell that the MgCoinGuy to like clarify things to like Sanjay and basically telling Sanjay that basically once that telling Sanjay to like type like the baby from to like the code and basically at that once like Sanjay will be doing that like the MgCoinGuy would be that would be crossing like the timer and at that point like the platform will be proceeded and basically at that point that basically Sanjay will be getting eliminated and at that point like the MgCoinGuy would be able to win and leave the students and versus me would be along the lines of the point like a given guy right now revealing and clarifying to like Sanjay right now. It's like the scenario that I'm looking and like the guy would be totally just like Sanjay right now already misunderstanding the given guy. And those price like the given guy will be totally think that would be one thing given guy will be clarifying things to like Sanjay. At that point like Sanjay would be totally agreeing to that independent side plan and that Sunderland would be eventually getting eliminated would be along the lines like the independent guy right now would be totally hoping it's definitely my brain. So not like I'm looking and I'm looking Sunderland doing exactly like the independent guys like plan as well. It's like the scenario that is that way like Sunderland like right as Sunderland would be about to die like I'm at that point is when I'm looking Sunderland would be remembering that jungle and like that last moments of like John Sugar, like John had placed all that hope on like basically San John being there from like the rain, taking care of like the rain. And basically like at that point when I'm from White San John be about to tie like the rain also like that for like at that point when I was feeling like that flooding of like the of all those past memories like happening for like San John connecting to like the MgCoin guys as well as John T's like journey so far in like the 2021st games which like San John might have happened to like happen to like notice it's definitely like only those parts alone which like Sanjay might have happened to like notice and like in those parts like I'm Sanjay will be totally remembering the fact that like then going guy had voted to not exit and leave the games but to like continue playing like the Squid games even after like the first two game. Then basically that voting for like then going guy to continue on to like the sixth game. That memory will be like rushing in for Sanjay and basically even more than that like I'm remembering that the fact that even while Sandon was winning to like rescue all to like save Janvi, the fact that like even like had betrayed Janvi and basically had and the baby had basically like focused on himself and basically and had conducted like just the game all by himself. Like the fact that like even while Sanjon was like totally winning like it all and let's say attempt to like save Janvi, so like the fact that like the and the point guy didn't and basically not only that like the fact that like son don't have to like basically save like the baby even in like the dystopian the fact that like the individual guy like had betrayed not only Janvi but also like the baby as well. Like the fact that the individual guy didn't even attempt that the very exact thing that Sanjo had done of like saving like the baby in that dystopian like the fact that the individual guy didn't even take that either like basically all this like would be all this like things that happened in the past life would be or memories will be rushing into like London's mind, and then that strong gut feeling would be happening would be strongly London will be sensing that basically while once again remembering like that. last moments of like Junti of like Junti placing that absolute faith and hope in like Sanjay taking the for like baby like basically collectively all this like sitting in like Sanjay while Sanjay is able to tie the baby onto like the pole like at the front like that very last second like Sanjay changing his like decision and the Sanjay totally like not tying like the baby to like the bone and basically Sanjay totally holding like the baby close and basically Sanjay talking back to like the Indian guy at the previous space and basically telling the Indian guy that like he won't give up like the baby like the banana that so like at that point I'm looking like the Indian guy getting enraged and at that point I'm looking Sanjay questioning like the Indian guy about like all the trials of like the Indian guy and at that point the Indian guy would totally trying to manipulate Sanjay by like justifying like MgCoinGuy guy continuing MgCoinGuy guys like voting of the continuing to like play the Squid games from like the Squid games to like the Squid games as well as like the MgCoinGuy guy totally like not attempting to carry like the baby in like the Squid game like instead of like Sanjay like basically the MgCoinGuy guy would be trying to like thoroughly try and manipulate Sanjay by saying that basically that by saying that basically things along the lines of like then like the Indian guy had tried to like pay chances that the Indian guy might have got eliminated and then that way like there won't be anyone for like the baby and basically the fact that like and like the Indian guy also will be telling Sandra that basically the Indian guy had that absolute confidence in like basically like to game that while Sandra decided to like carry like the baby and play like this good game that will get that point like when you don't have that absolute confidence in like Sangyong definitely succeeding even having a great chance of like succeeding than the like when you don't guy had carried like the maybe like this good game because of like Sangyong already being familiar with like trusting games and everything would be along the lines of like an excuse and basically through such excuses like the different guy would be trying to like once again trick and manipulate Sangyong into like giving up like the baby it's like a kind like the get it sounds to like I like they don't like code is like the scenario that I'm trying. Yet like I'm just something that please I'm not being convinced and at that point I'm like then the guy getting enraged and basically then the guy straight away pressing the timer and basically the time of starting and basically at that point then like the platform starting like to proceed towards like the third tower like the scenario that I'm trying and that way like the guy threatening Sanjo to like tie the baby onto like the boat. If Sanjon wants to like save the day, would be along the lines of correct like then young guy will be making. But like I'm putting like eventually like I'm putting like Sanjon will be probably saying that basically like definitely Sanjon won't be at all doing that. It's like the scenario that I'm doing. So like at that point I'm looking at Sanjon only has to be feeling strongly that basically that things would be extremely worse for like the baby if that the baby grows up with like the inborn guy would be along the lines of the different like Sanjon at that point would be feeling so like I'm doing like Sanjon at that point but that absolute seeing the space like holding on to that the baby and not giving up like the baby even at such critical situations like the scenario that I'm developing right and at that point I'm still giving my permission but like on the platform would be greatly reducing at that point like then you go and like being getting seriously worried about like the baby and like then you go and guy totally pulling Sangyeon along with that Sangyeon to like the third platform. So towards like the third tower before like the narrow platform will be fully getting reduced. So, like the just final scenario that I'm going to bring up mention that something also like the demon we have seen that the thing also especially for like Neo to like succeeding like destroying like the hard copy of the parts of game candidate. Yet like as soon as Neo will be succeeding at that like and destroying like uh from man and hope to be making it towards like Neo and will be at that point self on the like on the front made the front man info totally questioning and threatening Neo asking Neo as well like why Neo was there in like the front man's room and what did Neo do and basically or like a sort of this for like the front man seeing that the uh, that front man maybe figuring out that basically it was like a hard copy that of like a swinging candidate that Neo had destroyed just by seeing the places that just like the hotel that and the so that or like the after like it inspecting like the place while the studio workers would be keeping me on like a person around that point like scenario that so like at that point like at that point I'm also trying like involve totally finding out like that one of like the studio candidates like hard copy is like missing so like I'm just like involve totally threatening me out and basically asking me out to reveal whose hard copy was it that like Neo had destroyed and basically and also many references for like the frontman info like attempt to like maybe find out like this to get candidate if candidate like hard copy was it that like New York had destroyed like especially with like the precipitation even being like the lucky guy has been being no more like in different so like the frontman in only such a same situation where like info would be only having New York alone to like find out who was it that like that single speaking speaking candidate that like New York had saved like the that answer like the key to that answer will be only New York at that point will be the situation for like for command also like definitely I'm different of like info even like trying to like correct me or by basically maybe even telling me all that like the front info will like probably forgive me all and basically forgiving you out if like me all to reveal like the name of like the missing speaking candidate. But like I'm whispering definitely we all definitely at that point with like a smile totally obvious it to like reveal the name of like the last speaking candidate and at that point like I'm to like an encourage info like is very way eliminating me all of like the major scenario that I'm looking for the premium. Okay, so like the Korean section right now is for like more while going through the list. Just like they just top text to game winners like so they cutting that in like the when we all seeing like the photo of like Ilham as like the winner of like the very first good game that was played in like 1999. About the micro generation is what I'm whispering. And then like I'm saying that has like more to be go through like the list of like previous game winners like I'm like New York totally seeing like the photos of like info as well in like 2015 and totally info as well like 2016 but like New York also seeing like the photo of like the Boardman Park as well in between at like one of like the previous video as like the winner might be also but is like in the scenario that I'm developing and definitely you all won't be at all seeing like the photo of like the Rakhi guy at all as like an XT game winner. Rakhi guy definitely I'm saying to my friend won't get all an XT game winner at all. Definitely my creation. And then I'm looking for like Neon will be shortly realizing that basically that like the list Neon will be totally casually going through like the list of like the 2024 uh Squid Game. It's like the scenario in this book of like the 2024 Squid Games like the scenario that I would like. So in that like Neon while going through it like we're only expecting that page to where like the photo of like the winner of like the 2024 Squid Game will be present to totally be empty. So the one like Neo will be expecting while going through that book. But like I'm doing Neo at that point, maybe getting that huge shock where like I'm totally but like Neo would be completely seeing that like the how Neo maybe actually at that point will be finding out that like the Squid Games is like a rigged game where like the winners are already decided even in a pre-planned manner. Along the line, something like that shocking realization at that point happening to like Neo. It's like automatic pyramid. So like I'm totally like Neo totally totally when going through like the list book of like 20 million something like me also really finding out like that like the winners the photo of like Sangyon as well as like the sort of like Janki as well most likely being present in that like so as like the winners of like the 2024 Squid Games is like being such scenario that I'm looking and at that point like I'm putting like and you're totally being a really shocked it's like the limited scenario that I'm going right. And I'm totally predicting like that as well. That to be the case, and I'm that would be only for like would be totally according to like in-house like hope and that desire to like how that way have like to totally in an unfair manner to like help to as much as like possible for like in-hope to like help Sangyon and basically get Sangyon to finally become that the winner of like the 2024 Squid Games along with like the lady so that that in-hope according to my information, would be having like very little time left, would be able to like pass on like the baton to like Sangon and to have like that way have Sangon to like run like the students from like 2025 and eventually to have like that lot of young people because she will be grow up and turning into like another that in the temperature to on like the students at that point would be and because of this reason I'm talking about right now that in your shortly finding like the photo of like Sanjay and like the baby of like Jan lot of Janvi as like the winners of like the 24th game in that list because like in the scenario that I'm going to and I'm saying. And also my theory of question is for like the burning of like the documents come to like considering like by the time like example as well as like by the time like the police chief as well as like the account information usually want like the police chief and just like and that element of that one so those infiltrating and storming into like this but by the time the like the burning process of like the documents of Slack, documents for all documents connected to the recipients in that room of Slack info from an info that would be by then would be firmly over and like, by then like all that document solely due to like you know like and all that uh, document evidence like connected to that the recipients and connected to like info like involvement to like the recipients and all of that like and that should be sadly getting burned and destroyed step to the dangerous scenario that and that way like I'm preparing like by the time like right now the and by the time like according to the police youth and the battalion of the police officers will be showing up like at that point I'm going to let them having absolutely no evidence to uh to connect like the villains experience through info and that way to that tough info like them not having any evidence at all. It's like the scenario that I'm going to solely due to that new act of that burning all the documents that turns the scenario that I'm looking at. That way, like a fiction that either two possibilities, like since the government totally something like even after like the sixth game for like a final Squid game between like Sion versus like into frontman info fight happening like so I'm looking for like the thing that my direction that like in that fight like definitely once like Sion will be will be defeated info like at that point maybe either that info totally that can't not being able to like accept that reality of the like failure against like Sanjon and like ideology and basically that way getting eliminated is like the like the guy might be one possible scenario that I'm trying or like the other possible scenario that I'm trying for like by the time Sanjon will be defeating in that final school game would be when like I'm trying like the police chief and just like another battalion will be like storming up and basically and maybe by then like the VIPs would be managing to like escape from like the Squid Game building and mostly at that point like it will be just like info alone that and about the Squid Game workers and just like they use Squid Game workers alone like the and the police battalion would be able to like capture. Yet like I'm saying none of them having any evidence at all to connect all these like Squid Game workers as well as like info to like the grains of like Ranjan as well as Jaffa connection to like realistic things all sorts of extreme realistic things happening in like the game building is it's like the scenario that I'm it's like by then like from that especially because of like the talks of like the element way of like getting point like I'm looking like definitely because of this reason I'm looking by the time like the principal and like then the talent was showing up like and like it would be just like the eliminated players of like the sixth game like different like them including even like the MgCoin guys and the tournament like the MgCoin guy to be the person something like the MgCoin guy to be like the last person to get eliminated like in like you know that point of something like the MgCoin guys like uh 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 it that point was that would be totally something by that is like the scenario that I'm looking for. So definitely that way that them they're being absolutely no evidence at all. And I'm feeling like at that point, like I'm feeling like Sanjon as well as next jumper will be getting extremely frustrated and at that point I'm feeling like it was smiling and at that point like worried Jumbo and Sanjon like basically like at that point like first of all like Jumbo typically telling like the police battalion about that room or like the front man basically would be taking them there but like I'm feeling like that room will be like the document will be by then will be thoroughly uh, burned up and basically there will be absolutely no evidence at all of like any documents at all there. Either like it's like the scenario that I'm putting then comes to like jump up frantically taking like the for the police officers to that home where like uh the burning process happens within like the game ready. And basically there as well as and like and at that point I was like not only the body but like not even like the bones either not be up in there. It's like the scenario that I'm right. So after that for burning process like actually there will be like some sort of like a mechanic to like totally within like the game building to like totally eliminate like the bonds as well might be the case especially in my friends. So get rid of like the bonds as well might be like the case especially in that way like I'm feeling like John being absolutely as well as John thinking totally getting absolutely frustrated at that point like and like the police won't get us be able to like find any evidence at all uh, connected to like the claims of like Sanjo as well as example. Uh, Connecting to like criminalistic things that happening in like everything is like gonna that episode. And I'm also running like by then like and even though at that point I'm hoping that 24 would be asking and the civilian workers for like the percent of that weapon like everything at that point after maybe that info lack of the bringing like printers with like info of the that would on that absolute protecting and basically telling like the police chief that basically in a worried manner can basically that he had basically sort of he was like only trying to like as part of like creating a film like he had basically decided to like make the short film and basically so he had basically had such like friends like dress up in this like this like red costume and basically they had showed up to this like stranded island and basically they actually found this like building here and uh, basically they had found within this building that they had found like these like weapon lying and like that like Indo had that really no idea uh, that how all these weapons ended up there. Would be along the lines of the like info at that point, putting on that absolute fake action in front of like the police chief and like at that point I was like definitely Sangyong as well as like Janko will be getting extremely enraged and Sangyong will be even more extremely enraged and Sangyong will be shouting out to like the police chief that basically while pointing at like info telling that like about like surveillance of that info and everything was done and everything detailing it out, but still have the soul still like that lack of evidence factor still remaining prominent. Even when Sanjon is saying all this things that the police is like the scenario that I'm looking at. That way, like the police is not being able to like arrest neither info nor like the remaining youths game of the things. It's like the method scenario that I'm looking at. So like that way I'm looking for like to go around with like the remaining two game workers like dealing like this game will take like a smile and that's in a short free manner. It's like the scenario that I'm looking at. So like at that point, right as like Info would be about to leave from it to game island, like I'm like Sanjong only shouting out to like Info, saying that basically that like to the ultimate confirmation that I'm only bring like a final special final express game between which will be a fight between like Info and Sanjong with like the bet of like the winner getting to that like if like fundamental related info uses like basically like info it info those things like don't info the like only putting an end to like on this topic like the dimension of like because we along the lines like to figure out they place that bets against like Sanjong that final to game between like info and Sanjong scenario that so like that way I'm like finally fundamental related finally once that info will be leaving it along with like the twist to game of the like from like Crystal Game, get onto the boat and would be able to leave like Crystal Game Island like and at that point like Sanjon and it's children would say Sanjon like from behind like would be shouting out to like info that basically about their pet that basically info had lost to like Sanjon. So like basically this is it for like the info's like students would be along the lines and like Sanjon would be shouting out to like info. And I'm looking like right before me even like info at that point so like turning back towards like Sanjon and basically would be like smiling or like laughing at like Sanjon like giving the scenario like that. And basically that way giving that hint to like Sanjay that like into definitely not about plans on like we can just select what to like of like the best to like Sanjay. And basically to like and that along the lines of like info giving a hint at that point that info doesn't plan at all to like to then it to like to give like the scenario that way like info totally escaping even after like and so that even after that all that extreme effort and struggle of like Sanjay as well as like Janko to make it towards like the person running like yes and everything like for the running still that Sangyon like struggle ending up in way in that point is like the scenario but like Sangyon not being able to like bring down that info and basically the case of like Janko at that point would be on the friend would be feeling really because like Janko would be having absolutely no plans at all to like basically due to like Janko's like soft one up towards like info like Janko will be totally wanting to like talk to like info and will be wanting to like really somehow change Info's mindset and turn Info back to how he was in like the past into like the person Info was in like the past. And for example, that way to like get back like hold the other hold the one Jan hold the directing. So like Jan Ho at that point should be feeling relieved. And so that way, like example, we might be not for having any plans at all to like arrest him or definitely my brother intention. And maybe the reason for like Sanjay keeping that the fact that like in office like the most of like a secret from that everyone even including Sanjay might be due to this fact alone, even to the person might be due to this reason definitely my brother intention. So that way like and during like then scenario being like jump of like feeling relieved to a certain extent while Sanjay would be totally feeling extremely frustrated and basically like he will be feeling as if like all that efforts working like being is like in the scenario that I'm looking at the correct number three. Okay, so like the movement of the emission right now is for like the passageway that like New York has taken from like the room of like the officer to all the way to like the room at like the 10 match will be a pass such a passageway with like the won't be that have to be more CCTV cameras across throughout like the entire of like that passageway as well as like from that lift as well that like New York and like the officer have thought of and basically even in that room where like the fighting the lift had stopped and basically the fighting had continued and basically like near even using a weapon and eliminating like the officer like basically so that entire pathway from like the officer's room leading to that entire point of location where like near had like eliminated like the officer like so that entire pathway like luckily like totally running just not using any CCTV or like as well as like there that entire area would be seriously extremely soundproof might be also the game should be but using like not having used like weapon to like eliminate weapon like sound to like eliminate like the officer and yet like the fact that this entire time like info having like info neither info nor none of like the civilian workers have even realized about that and you're having even after doing that like you're having made it to like the command and everything what they did with the series might be the case is definitely my brain issue. Again, so that definitely not the brain issue right now. And like example right now, but the most likely which was like widely to like until the coast guard right towards like the location of the power filling candidate in like 2 hours like until that point to that keep like the power to be to keep the power to be candidate safe and then they from like another pursuit team like of like Indian workers who might feel totally with the reason for like it will be most likely Janko's like strategy that like Janko might have the moment Janko had entered into like the apparently into like the boat of like the possible candidate like Janko might have seen that location tracker on the board which definitely consumed quickly because of that Janko already having like the experience from like the general experience where like when Janko had tried to like escape using like the dice suit of like the skill change like the fact that like the frontman was able to like save up for like Janko with such absolute precision like I'm going like Janko might have figured that is the into that basically the Rodriguez like location tracker fit on to like the things connected to the experience. Like get on the lines like Janko might have figured and that so like that game was like Janko had entered into like the both of like the half game and today like I'm different. But yeah, that means that like Janko might have noticed like the secret location tracker kept the secret within that board. So like I'm doing that Janko might have as part of like Janko's strategy like Janko might have tied that location tracker onto like the dice of like Janko in basically right now the spring like Janko will be like making his way towards like the what the tricks like that so it like the location right attached onto Janko and I will bring like the big Janko at that point set like one of us like attaching like the location right up with the power speaking candidate both towards like Janko might have straight away also use this weapon and destroy it like the location right up of like the both of the box team as well might be one like Janko might have definitely going to the and then Janko with like the location right up of like the board of like the marks will candidate like Janko might have touched down to this like nice event like Janko will be right now so they make his way towards like the Studio Island might be that institution that way you like totally have like the attention of like and focus of like and then the student workers like to totally follow Janko and that way to like keep to separate them from like the both of like the path and they lead from to keep their attention and focus to separate them from like the other candidate and so that like by the time in 2 hours like the Coast Guard would be arriving like the student candidate as well as like that was like team member to like basically survive until that point. Will be what like Janko will be trying to like achieve through this like current strategy. Might be exactly that definitely might be trend. So this might be what might be happening right now, especially in brain invasion. So definitely have to depend like for like the scenario to be like as like Janko will be getting close using it like dice will be getting close to like just to be a minus like Janko. So the detaching like that location tracker from this like dice and like putting it onto let me see like the scenario that I'm dropping it into like the scenario that I'm doing. And from there like I'm like Janko and from there like I'm doing like Janko totally quickly and steadily making it to like the CDM and before like the next first shooting to like track that location tracker and make it work like to prevent that like jump off like you will be getting close to like the CDM island and connecting to the dropping that like location tracker onto like the sea and like jump off to make it to like the CDM island with like the scenario that I'm going to break and the condition. So that way what the prediction project while jump out would be that stealthy making laps progressing within like this game island and trying to like, find like this game building and would be finally making it to like this game building and would be finally starting like preparation into like this game building that so it's kind of like another set of like pursuing would be like heading out of like this game building and basically to check out like that location tracker in that area close to like this game island like the cases that name the production. That way, among like the total um, uh, workforce of like the total number of like skill workers in like the skill building like a different and construction of like skill workers as well. But the skill workers as well heading out from like the skill building exactly while Jumbo will be stealthily make it like inspiration to like the skill building. It's like the scenario that I'm just about to and so like that way, according to my friend, in terms of the friend that was like Sangyong's like a rebellion having taken out like a bunch of like Syrian workers basically the like and the section of like set of like Syrian workers getting eliminated. So like as like the first 18 being sent and they believe that they're getting eliminated by Janko and the second number like they uh look like the also one like the second pursuing has been according to my friends and the like the Syrian building like number different like at that point, like within like game will take like not much great number of like skill game workers will be remaining while Janko only by the permission at that point just to make it like integration in like skill game building. It's also like the positive scenario that I'm making this like I'm on okay, so like that we don't put anything right now, especially for like some jobs like not what the bit of like the daily to like the individual guys. So only to like the individual guys not leading some job. It's like the scenario that I'm about to bring. So definitely that 5 minutes time limit like I'm recording like song that they standing in that narrow platform and basically not giving up with the baby and I'm looking like as like 10 so like that way once that 10 seconds alone will be remaining like at that point I'm looking like then you can guys see which is like strange self it's not and realistic nature like I'm doing like then you can die being extremely worried as like 10 seconds alone will be remaining solely connecting to like the individual guys like somewhere that I don't remember that like then you can die at that point that desperately taking Sanyon to actively like enter into like the third tower, like the scenario that I'm so like at that point, and that way like at that point that experience that of like the guy is what I'm trying to do to start like fixing in like Sanyon's mind to like definitely to never give up like the basically like the Indian guy no matter what like the scenario that I'm like Sanyon at that point like while staring at like Indian guy will be left with like 10 seconds alone remaining like I'm doing like approach that narrow platform like I'm doing Sanyong slowly while staring at the Indian guy walking toward like the tower and third tower and entering like the third tower while 2 seconds around the jail remaining like with Navi well after the end. That point is a something like the enraged Sindikundai at that point is actually enraged and frustrated Sindikundai at that point is straight away running toward and straight away pressing the button for like the timer for like the game in like the third tower. And I'm looking like then Sindikundai thinking like the pole and being straight away that okay attacking Sanjo like the Sina that I'm looking at. And that is that thing in that totally Sanjo like at that point you just struggling to keep the baby safe with like the scenario that I'm looking at. And like I'm looking like then you can guy like attacking Sanjo so much and the Sanjo taking a lot of injuries and I'm looking like yet like Sanjon will be ensuring even with all that interest like Sanjon will be always ensuring to that keep the baby safe and like that act of it then become guy eventually uncertain the permission to the like the become guy usually ending up being ashamed of like what he has of the amount of then become guy has left to come and basically that was the thing in like the become guy walking towards like the edge and basically that way edge of the tower and that way like then become guy getting like the scenario that affected all the and that a badly injured son Johnson will be like only holding on to like the baby will be declared at that point as like the winner of like the then what's the games is like the scenario that I'm talking about. Okay, so like the minimum friends and right now is that like the Egon guy would be we don't have to be certain that like the baby belongs to that the Egon guy. But like I'm looking like it would be that absolute desperation of like the Egon guy to not will that absolute kid something to get the baby, which would be what would be the reason for like the Egon guy out of desperation right now would be that the reason for like him like trying to like train Sanya as like the father of like that's the father of like the baby so that like the Indian guy will be all that will be totally like the Indian guy desperately trying to like comfort himself from that extreme burning pain of like guilt within like the Indian guy that will be within like the Indian guy right now. As for like the things the Indian guy is like saying and trying to do in like the person it's definitely connecting to like the baby is definitely my book lyrics and okay, so like Nidam Premcham right for like scenario that I'm looking at for like exactly why 10 seconds alone will be like remaining for like that prince for that narrow platform to like collapse. At that point when a good friend like someone will be picking up like the weapon and running through like that narrow platform and like doing that like I'm saying like exactly to that point like and even seeing that like then you can guy will be totally shocked. And because like from the Bitcoin guy thing to that was totally unexpected so like I'm like still then Bitcoin guy quickly trying to like react and then like then Bitcoin guy while holding on to the baby would be running towards like that uh, towards stepping trying like to step on that button in like the third platform and start like the actual time so that like once like the actual timer will be started like the consequence will be like not likely that like that for it will be instantly collapsing even before like the remaining time seconds will be over. Might be that case certainly not 300. So like that way like the different guy as like Sanjay will be running through the narrow platform uh with the weapon like and the different like one like Sanjay will be just crossing almost like just crossing like the halfway point of like the narrow bridge platform like and the different like then you can like reaching to like the button and like puffing like the button and at that point like the fridge uh destroying getting destroyed and at that point comes at that very last second before like the fridge would be getting destroyed like in Sanjay will be making that absolute uh jump that extreme jump from the fridge to like the third tower that the scenario that happened and Sanjay just barely managing to like make it to like the third tower of like the scenario that happened. So then the guy will be totally shocked. Like I'm thinking like then the guy up like tripping on that timer that will be destroying like the bridge like and like the MD guy. And at that point, Silvan will like then the guy like quickly trying to like point towards like the edge of like the tower while racing like the very in like the scenario that happened. Right? So like at that point, like on the point like the moment like then the guy would be racing like the baby. Uh, at that point, itself, I'm looking at John Sobi will be landing from that jump and basically and reaching like the tower and like quickly throwing like the weapon at like the individual guy. And I'm looking that way that Sanjon taking out like the individual guy. And that way, like at that point itself, like and at that point after taking the hit, like instantly like the individual guy will be falling and like at that point itself, like Sanjon died and like catch up like the baby. There's like the scenario that I'm saying like the baby, like the scenario that I'm looking at. While with that weapon that Sanjon will be throwing like everything like Sanjon, it's really taking out that Benjamin guy and the Benjamin guy on that way like Benjamin guy will eliminated through the attack of like Sanjon and like on the top of like the tower itself like Benjamin guy getting eliminated which like in the scenario that I'm looking at and it's really like Sanjon as well as like the baby being declared as like the winner of like the 20 for the game like in the scenario that I'm putting. Okay, so like definitely my good prediction right now is definitely for that Sanjay not legal way of organic like things going guy in like the fight is like the scenario that I'm all different. But like I'm like that fight could be progressing on okay, but like Jen guy in multiple times like I'm just like attempting to that attempt walking to running towards like the babies like the scenario that I was expected and I'm going that it's been such an extreme struggle for like Sanjay to like stop like Jen guy from getting towards get towards like the baby to like threaten Sanjay to like give up like the fight will be around the lines of the different that then the when guy would be in like a confused kind of backstage whether like Sanjay like was like genuine about like the things that Sanjay said about like Sanjay himself giving up for like the anyone guy and like the but like I'm remembering like at that point like definitely Sanjay's mindset would have by then like would have definitely changed Sanjay to be genuine about that. That's definitely my impression. So the last thing Sanjay at that point would be wanting will be to like have like the daily growth like things like that scenario that so that way like in that fight that's like the fight the was like then you can guys repeatedly trying to like one towards like the daily and Sanjay and then stop it like the guy and that will be the cutting in like that in one of it that by like the guy like it's so bigger essence of like then you can guys like rush towards like the daily like and the like Sanjay like finally picking up like the ball and then like Sanjay so badly injuring the critical guy that like, at that point Sanjay would be definitely totally thoroughly believe that like Sanjay that technical guy has been eliminated like the snap that I'm right. So like at that point is when I'm the primary Sanjay stopping me like with the thing that basically finally it's all over to be the line like Sanjay would be thinking but like at that point is when I'm the primary Sanjay stopping realizing that like Sanjay had crossed like the button to start like the timer for like the game in like the third hour. So like at that point I'm referring that that's what shock and realization happening for like Sanjay. Just like this announced that and Sanjay like looking at like the baby. Maybe at that point looking at like the baby. And at that point I'm looking like Sanjay will be going through that absolute biggest like pain and suffering that like Sanjay will have gone through in her life for like the first times as like the scenario that I'm looking because like at that point like Sanjay would be painfully would be feeling forced to like take the decision to like probably to take the baby and walk towards like the edge. It's like the scenario that I'm doing. I believe like from Sanjay's point of view, Sanjay will be totally thinking that like regardless of that the baby becoming like the winner and like and getting all that money that Sanjay will be totally feeling that will be totally pointless as long as like the baby has absolutely no one at all to like take care of it basically. So definitely at that point I'm looking like Sanjay will be feeling as if like the best question would be to that Sanjay feeling that like the best question would be to that in the games through such a manner would be along the lines Sanjay would think. So like that way I can think Sanjay for like going through the biggest pain in his life at that moment, which would be at that moment, while trying to be like carrying like the baby and like walking towards like the scenario that I'm saying, like I'm going to be walking towards like edge, like I'm looking at Sanjay will be looking at like the baby. I think he is like so I think it's like a baby girl. So like if Liam is like Sanjay, if it isn't like the person that like Sanjay loves like the most in his life is like Sanjay like home thought that basically to so it's just so that Sanjay can't be just like basically definitely I'm just like looking at like as Sanjay was carrying like the baby and walking towards like the edge like I'm just like looking at like the baby's face like I'm just like Sanjay will be reminded of like the memories of like Sanjay found out like basically all that memories precious memories of Sanjay that Sanjay has shared with his black dog in like the past, like all that like would be coming rushing in and like into his like mind at that point, like looking out of that and so like Sanjay at that point will be going through the extreme pain and will be like as here that like Sanjay will be standing at like while holding like the pain the spectrum like Sanjay will be standing at like the edge. So that at that point is when I'm looking like sudden and I'm looking at that point just like 5 seconds it on will be left remaining at that point, so, like the scenario that and at that point, I'm whispering that as like Sanjon will be about to take that plunge, like I'm whispering like at that moment is when I'm whispering like Sanjon that is happening and Sanjon hearing like the announcement that like the winner of like the 2024 games is like Sanjon as well as like Claire to think with like the baby would be along with the lines on the like the announcement happening at that point and Sanjon will be totally shocked and will be confused that like what happened and at that point I'm whispering like the situation being like as like while 5 seconds alone will be remaining like while around like 20 or 10, 15 seconds alone will be remaining and like so at that point like while Sanjon will be going through that absolute suffering and will be in tears and will be taking the baby and slowly walking towards like the edge like at that point I'm by then like I'm like the badly injured like MgCoinGuy would be regaining back his like consciousness. It's like the scenario that I'm living and he then you can die while laying on the floor like I'm like up at the top of the tower like I'm living like then you can die like will be seeing that absolute pain in like Sanjong's face and like at that point is when I was running then you can die would be thoroughly feeling ashamed of left himself of like the monster he has turned out to and basically would be um probably having that after guilt happening for like finally happening for like then the guy would be facing that guilt finally and that would be at that point deciding to like only to like the at least like the very minimum that like the guy so to do to like make up for like the all the experience realistic things the end one guy has done so far in the along the lines and the one guy so like then the one guy would be really looking at like at that time of where like I'm like maybe 10 seconds alone will be remaining. And like while then going guys will be looking at like Sangon as like Sangon and like the will be carrying like the baby and like will be walking towards like towards like the edge of it. And I'm looking like at that point like the Indian guy totally really so extremely weak yet like I'm looking like the Indian guy like struggling just like would be at that point I'm looking like the landing and Indian guy would be already close to like the edge. Uh, the film dreams. So like I'm like as like time would be about to run out and I'm looking like maybe as like 5 seconds alone would be remaining like I'm looking like then the guy finally making it towards like the very edge and basically that way like then the guy getting eliminated and like that way like the announcement happening as like Sangyong uh while holding on to like the baby would be about to take that plunge like the announcement happening that like Sangyong and like the baby uh declaring Sangyong and like the various like the winners of like the 2024 games of like the scenario that I'm qualifying and like the VIPs like will be totally celebrating that and especially the VIP who was like totally who had placed the bet and like was like totally cheering for the player 22 like on the different like the player the VIP was cheering for like maybe like something at that point will be like celebrating at that point and then it's also like at that point it's like in the scenario that I'm totally playing and that way like Sundown and like the day getting up can like you know stuff like the school get identity for Indians like the scenario that I put on that I'm not putting yes, so like definitely not potential right now. It's like really if I would let them begin doubts and like Sundown right now you won't be able to like take care of like the day like I'm so right now the last thing Sanjay will be bonding with me to that through sign on like sacrifice to have like the baby become like the winner of like the 24th games yet that yet still like we have absolutely no one to be there to take care of like, the baby like basically that when more like so Lisandro will be totally saying like basically ending like the game as like the best option for like Sandon as well as like the as like the best option and like Sandon that way okay within that in his mind yet like would be going through the extreme pain and would be carrying like the lady and walking towards like the edge walking slowly towards like the edge and I'm whispering like at that and so like at that point when it's something like the twist can happen because like the both would be watching that Sandon carrying like the lady and walking towards like that then it would be that so they absolutely must be like what would be at that point going through Sandon's mind. So like I'm looking at definitely the twist that would be happening at that point is when I'm totally cutting that info straight away, turning as like Sandon would be reaching that edge while carrying that the way that I'm looking at that point itself I'm looking like info turning off like the timer. It's like the scenario that I'm looking for and like that point Sandon being shocked and confused that for like the timer turned off and basically at that point, so like the VFDs as well would get only confused as to like what's going on. Would get on the line when that nothing and like they would be turning back towards like the frontline info like at that point of the like so we eliminating like all the VFDs with like what scenario that I'm looking for like so that way like I'm putting that info of the frontline info prioritizing like it will be definitely with the 40 meter premium info definitely won't be having much time left at all. Definitely no premium because definitely even though info has all this like wealth and everything like but still I'm preferring like maybe for info it might be an emotional decision emotional reason for like info that like I'm preferring like according to my boyfriend I'm totally preferring like it's invoked to the person would be even after gaining all the wealth after like becoming strong man like, and winning like civilians don't feel like still invoked to the person might be only having that typical kidney and definitely not the brain and it would be or due to lack info lack finding that info giving up one to that kidney for example like that act of like involved we don't see that like absolutely pressure that like info might have been like gaining all that wealth like info might have been probably unwilling uh to have and but it may might be the case it's definitely a possibility that I'm looking for. So uh so because of this reason like even because of the like info might be having only a single kidney and I'm looking like that single kidney might have gotten damaged, might have been the case with being mentoring. So like that, that person and transition for the brain actually to most like mindset and it's like most of the reasons like and like since way back like in home I know so we've taken that decision that like people will never get a kidney replacement and until this like last us would be only would be keeping that kidney that kidney area vacant that that kidney would have gave to like example and like the kidney area vacant like that kidney area that done host and like in whole be keeping it vacant until all the way until it's like that would be along the lines of like a decision or like a promise that it might have made to himself. It's that way that might be the case with minimum threats and like that mindset of that info might have not at all changed even after like info maybe eventually finding out that like the single kidney of that info is getting damaged might as damage might be the case if like positive that about current uh, so like that way that about the like info might not index the person like info might not at all have much time left. So definitely that way like info like the person will be desperate to like to thoroughly change Sangyon and they need to have Sangyon take over like the and around like the Squid from 2025, especially meant for impression. So like that way I'm looking like info for that scenario to be like info prioritizing that having that saving Sangyon and having Sangyon from like Squid from like 2025 and eventually to have like the dot of like Janto like that be the customer of like Sangyon in like the different fields of like maybe and to run like the student in like different fields of like maybe info for the prioritizing that about everything else and basically the top something else point of view I'm so listening info which is totally attribute certain that basically eliminating that the PFDs will be creating that a lot of powerful enemies for like against info would be might be one thing that info might be will be certainly going to mention yet like maybe due to that info not having like a fundamental function not having much time that like and like info not even caring about it at all and basically like prioritizing that Sangyon as well as like the taking over like games eventually taking over like giving that an even higher priority. It's like the scenario and like totally placing all that focus on like Sangyon in like the future like really forcing things out at that point against like all the enemies like that so that action of like simple eliminating like the VIPs would be getting created. It's definitely maybe considering that is like the scenario that I'm exploring right now with without like creating like and with like eliminating like the VIPs and basically like then I'm suffering like Sangyon would be totally confused at that point and it's suffering like actually uh, and at that point, like 2003, like totally like showing up to like the top of like the circle tower is like the scenario that I was in like the from my perspective, like the scenario that and so like at that point, I'm totally looking for like any to like totally like advantage of that whole situation and that things like Sanjay. At that point, I was like supposed to get eliminated like unexpectedly. So we go going up to like the top of like the circle tower. And Sanjay will get all these of seeing that and I'm looking that telling Sangyon that basically that like now Sangyon is like only meant like that and basically that like Sangyon can totally pay off that debt by devoting like the remaining of like Sangyon's life to that for like the students by working for like the students by running like the students will be along the lines of the like will be making that absolutely clear in front of like the shop Sangyon is like the scenario that happening and he will be also telling Sangyon that like basically like the uh, sort of like he will be eventually ending up in the Christian user will be ending up the success of that scenario and will be running like this again in like the distant future. Okay, along the lines, I'm something like make that up to declare a system of like a shop scenario, like the scenario that I'm looking at. At that point, I'm looking like scenario will be totally feeling absolutely frustrated and like that we are looking like scenario at that point, get like I'm looking like scenario at that point, like coming up with like a plan and I'm looking like scenario at that point, okay. Uh, and I'm looking like info saying all this to like scenario and info is back about to like head back to like the elevator from like the top of the tower. But like five before it will be about to leave like like Sangwan totally telling info that basically to like make it a bet like basically Sangwan telling info that basically that along the lines of that basically that's what that info and like the VIP that for them are about like bets like this winning candidates all of them are like just the bet that like info and like the VIP made would be along the lines of like Sangwan would be like probably attempting to like base info into totally take that faith and basically accepting that challenge to Sangyeong to like probably place a bet uh, and like to play a final full game between like since like the current Sangyeong number telling info that since like the current full game like only uh, was like basically info had basically helped Sangyeong out like basically why not like basically place a bet and basically conduct like the conduct like the mindful game once again, but like a battle between that fight between that and like Sanjon in the end of the night, Sanjon will be saying and the winner gets to take the decision. And if that Sanjon telling info that like info wins like actually Sanjon will be thoroughly agreeing and saying everything exactly according to like info's wishes. But like if info loses like basically uh, then like the Squid game ends here at that point here and now if like info loses will be along the lines and the like Sanjon would be challenging, making that challenge of like a bet to like info at that point is like the scenario that I'm looking and I'm looking like solely due to that extreme sheer overconfidence I'm looking at that point info will be feeling I'm looking like info probably accepting that bet of like a challenge point one is like the scenario that I'm looking and at that point I'm looking like the fight on top of that circuit or I'm looking like the next fight will be beginning which happening will be that ultimate fight between that the frontman info and like Sanjay like so that would be no agrees at all in that as like audience at all. So like in the scenario that I'm looking so in that fight between like Sanjay and Sinho like campus bring that league eventually Sanjay like struggling his way into that totally or scoring and defeating info is like in this scenario that I'm going to break and all the and at that point, I'm right now getting more towards like about today that like once like I'm going to pretty quick info like understanding exactly at that point with like the situation of that info will be like info having lost or that basically the VIPs uh as well as like losing the bet against like London and everything. So maybe I'm going to bring as for like an alternate other possibility that I'm going to bring for like info at that point that would be totally feeling that as like an absolute failure and basically won't be able to that won't be accepting that reality and basically won't be able to like accept that reality and basically at that point that getting eliminated that like that would be like the other person be threatened and like that elimination of that and that part of like especially since like happening exactly like, once like Janko would be finally making it to that exact location of like the 6 p.m. Then at that point exactly that Janko point like Janko will be making it to that area like at that point itself like like fought happening right in front of like Janko and Janko getting that absolute shock like the scenario that I'm going especially since like the current situation even being like Janko's like absolute journey towards like the straight journey to like make it towards like the Kimbo getting closer and closer with like Janko like probably making it to like the Studian island like I'm preparing definitely by the exact I'm talking about like for like the scenario to be exactly one by the time like Janko will be making it or by himself like making it to that location where like the 6 billion would be taking place between like Sanjok and Info like like that point is when I'm preparing like it was like elimination happening right in front of like Janko. It's like the scenario that I'm preparing I'm after yes, so like the generation right now is like or like not trying to like save junkies like maybe by searching for like the frontline and while searching for like the frontline particular that you're ending up running into ending up finding that problem of less the VIPs definitely not frame rate because you're can basically uh, seeing like VIPs like you're being absolutely shocked and then the like you would be getting encouraged as well at that point. That at that point itself I'm preferring that an inspiration you would be like eliminating all the VIPs like the on the spot like giving the scenario that I'm looking about. And exactly at that you will be doing this like I'm thinking like the front man would be reaching and making it back to that current of that Korea is like the scenario that I'm doing and like I'm like that to be like the secure that having found like the huge coast guard ship that has been made so close to like Studio Island like the neighbor like info on the front like only deciding to that basically even though that's the VIP would be extremely disappointed uh if like they found out for like the coast guard uh getting so close to like Studio even get so close to like Studio and still have the like that info that needs deciding to that help to that uh, to that the VIPs about like the situation and basically to have like the VIPs like leave like the game island on their helicopter, gambling on the helicopters like to save like the VIP come with like the permanent who like quickly showing up to like the home of like the VIPs. But like at that point I was like info getting that absolute shock on saying like he's an all the VIPs eliminated by like now that I'm for like an entry info like from an info like straight away eliminated like the scenario that I'm talking about. And my different so like the VIP audience like want just like that like I'm the friend certainly info probably the only thing in Indo's mind at that point would be like the leave like the situation like the ghost like they're probably feeling that basically doesn't have much time left alone and basically not only that like not even to even escape from it to be meeting will be along the lines like would be also feeling also like what will that I'm looking so not only should be feeling as if like he has lost it all and so like the only thing in the was mind that from an was mind would be for at that point to lack of the end the games and basically end the sixth game and basically for like the from man to that and like I'm looking like involved you also shocked at like the final result of like the system game being like the situation is like on your end like the ladies and so definitely I'm looking like overall like the front manager at that point you would have decided to like put an end to like the system game and to like with like what little time that involved the feeling as like he has left before like the first start so and up involved like involved it only deciding to like straight away go up to like Sanjay and basically to do his like absolute best to like totally change Sanjay like mindset and to like and to even to real about like to create that extreme depth within like Sanjay something to like involve that way to like go to like use chat the little time left to like corrupt like Sanjay like mindset to like the mindset and basically to turn sign on exactly like input and basically that way even if like input get like arrested and the person like still like could be only hoping that like Sanjon still since like Sanjon has already like all that huge reward money of like winning like president wins like even if uh like he looks up like this like to be in the thing like basically and even if like info gets stuff, but still through Sangyo like to have like it was like begins they want to Sangyo like basically and eventually like it's a through like justice counter as well to like make this possible and this protection for going up to like the top of like the third tower and basically would be like saying would be trying to create that depth within like Sangyo but like I'm doing that for correction eventually and it's leading to the Sangyo making that bet against like info and like that fight against Sangyo and in which like Sangyo would be totally defeating info and info that way getting eliminated. It's like my reference that is something. Okay, so that's a preemption right now. It's definitely for like Janho who definitely don't find like new in like the from Manchester right now. It's like the next scenario that right. So definitely I was bring like by the time Janho will be making it to like the from Manchester like new would have only had only found and made to that the home of that the VIPs and would have eliminated the VIPs. It's like the scenario that I'm looking for. And like I'm also trying like it would be after like info would have eliminated that one member selection would have eliminated Neo and basically it would be like leave it to like the game uh, area to complete uh, to totally that get Sangyong to like change Sangyong's mind. Like to be at that point that I'm like that whole thing then making it to like the home of like the vehicles and seeing like the situation there, like the scenario that I'm living everybody. And by then, like I'm sorry, by the time that Jumbo will be making it there, by then like Jumbo will be getting that to the shop at like seeing like Hope and Sangyong like basically on top of like that third tower and basically like them having that absolute fight between each other in that final game would be what like like Janho that in Hope versus Sangyong don't develop into single what like Janho would be at that point shot and you see all like the fuse three in like the whole of like the clear was like the Windows scenario that I'm looking for. And that way, by the time like Jumbo, you make it through like that Squid Game area, like info getting eliminated, just like in this scenario that I'm looking at. Okay, so like my particular impression right now is that is humans are precious. Might be Sanjon like message that like Sanjon fight to that get info and info it's definitely not friend, definitely because of like Sanjon having been like the Sanjon journey, like the Indian for videos since like Sanjon has spent a certain extent of time together with like in hope definitely even though even with like Sanjon that person realization that like in hope is like the front man and the person running like the shipping still definitely with that time that like Sanjon journey like 20 works to them like that Sanjon had spent with like in hope definitely Sanjon while having reached this like final moments like Sangam looking back might have felt that in that like actually there's like hope. Looking back like Sangam might have that like his final moments might have felt that there is hope for like a change of like a hope for like a possibility of like a change in like in hope. At least Sangam will be absolutely certain that like his message would definitely be straight away won't be at all be able to like, get through to like the VIPs at all, but for like before definitely Sangyong will be raising that absolute hope that like through that Sangyong's like action as well as like Sangyong's like that final dialogue as well as that action of like that final elimination like basically that the different like that ideology of Sangyong as well as like that following Sangyong following up Sangyong's like ideology and protecting Sangyong's ideology and like that very final moment even through not just through words, but also through the like action of that fall and elimination, like definitely Sangyong. That would be like the final attempt of like Sangyong to shortly have that scenario to like shortly thoroughly home info until like basically info could be eventually be physics more of like these and finally uh would be forced to like totally give up on like this like ideology and running like the Squid Game that would be my preparation. This would be that final attempt by Sanjay to definitely stop info and like to stop and put an end to like this game might be what might have happened if the being able to everything. So like my development about like Sanjo, even while saying like humans are like still from that point Sanjo stopping and basically following that through with like actions would be definitely for like to have that message be as strong and sharp as possible to hit for that message to like easily hit and affect the definitely remember the brain because like it would be definitely precious that that word that English Sanjay might have definitely through that message might have been trying to that convey to like about that feeling of pressure that basically even in that final situation that basically the fact that like on top of like Sanjay back in like 2016 when Sanjay could like totally easily with all that reward money just by eliminating Sanjay the fact that like Sanjay had given up or that requirement so lead to let's say Sangu, even after everything Sangu did like maybe basically that as well as like in like the person like basically even while in like the sixth game intention for the game but even while Sangu is like could like secure such an easy win like a horse that like at like uh the very needed in like a horse place like maybe in a those Sangu could like easily when like the six good game in that final situation, like with like Sangon and like the baby around remaining. Just like the fact that like Sangon like completely decided to take the decision to be that like to give that message that basically even in such extreme extremely advantageous situation like basically the fact that like Sangon totally gave up gave it all up and and quick elimination will be definitely to send that message that it's only and solely because that humans are precious. Definitely might interpret like by showing that how precious that baby is, and basically that way connecting that to humans being precious definitely might interpret into precious to the point of that Sangyon being willing to give himself up. So that might remember that the two layers of that Sangyon final message might be that since that it's like we are not process like luckily unlike a bunch of process from like the racetrack who would be totally while racing would be only focused on like basically who would be only thinking of like basically making it to like the finish line first basically like totally contrary like when it comes to like the case of like putting human into that very same racetrack namely like through like Sangion's journey itself like basically like Sangion would be trying to make people understand that basically there are humans have like that ultimate power of like selflessness to that to the point of that basically humans even giving up on like the race just so that like the humans slowing down purposefully that they even in the race like humans have like the power to like please slow down so that like others could like get ahead and basically humans have like the power to get like charade so that like others could like win and that humans have like the power to like even while it's in like a race like humans have like the power to like pick others up even when others fall like humans have like the power to like protect and shield and like help others up uh, to swim like the race alongside like alongside like the human. Like basically like the fact that like humans have all this like selfless qualities as well making humans like so extremely different and precious that humans are not possessing a race on a race track that humans are like precious and should not be in a race track. Basically it will be along the lines like human life that precious will be along the lines of like that haunting message like I'm delivering that Sangyon at that at like very final moment might have actually process like actions of that just that in this scenario that we might have tried to like send and to with that absolute intent to like on in hope until in hope finally you'll be forced to like give up on that running like the studio anymore. Uh, will be along the lines and like what might have happened is definitely what Sanjay might have done definitely not the rendition. And for definitely my theory I'm right now that is definitely because of that Sanjay message I'm totally interesting right now. For definitely not only the VIPs but like info as well. Even with like the postcard getting so close to like the game and like still able to conduct info and along with like VIPs info as well. Definitely successfully getting from like the game island on like helicopters, is like the scenario that I'm going to play. And like even with like Janho's like infiltration, like I'm trying definitely Janho would be like quite desperately searching for like in on the trying like Janho totally we are running into like the element of like the scenario that and that means that then with extreme shock for like Janho like the scenario that I'm and I'm for like even before like Django would be making towards like the eliminated Sangyong like Django would be most likely running into Neol's like the scenario that I'm like so like Django at that point would be like going up to like Neol and like at that point it's like Neol Django would be totally confused seeing like an unmarked like game of like basically sitting on like the throne of like the front man like the romance room. So if they have different like Janko being confused and for like at that point they actually like taking Janko to like save like the baby. That's like the scenario that I'm doing. And while pointing to like the TV screens like the scenario that I'm doing. And then I'm different like definitely at that point the different like Janko will be also hearing like the sound of like helicopter taking flight from the house as well as like the scenario that I'm so like Janko would be at that point would be feeling wounded at the point that like and definitely hand would be absolutely feeling that absolute certainty in like definitely in that clinical person was likely being like like for managing giving so like Django will be giving up on his hope of like being able to like make it towards like that point and like then Django will be like of like being like the situation is with like 30 minutes around remaining like I'm like Django will be quickly making it towards like that like SquidGame play area, and they're like given like at that point we given like getting that shock of like finding out that Sandra has been fully made, and then like the William was bring also like that elevator would be totally shut down at that point is like the scenario. So also like the scenario that I'm done. That way like I'm like jump out with like 30 minutes remaining like I'm like jump out being forced to like take that stairs on like the side wall of that cylindrical round tower, like the scenario, cylindrical tower, like the scenario that I'm doing. So like from when the jump out different like that, they jump was probably his way into like making it to like the very top of like that stairs, and still like jump will be having that absolute half task of like basically of that making it to like the top of like the tower from like the top of like the stairs. Uh, like the scenario that I'm trying yet like I'm putting Django somehow like having some sort of like that we have some sort of like an equipment in his like pocket in position but which like I'm putting like Django will be probably using to like struggle to like that absolute maximum and taking that absolute extreme numbers and is somehow managing still managing from like the very top of like the wall stair of like the cylindrical tower to making it to like the very top of like the cylindrical tower like the scenario that I'm expecting. And like once like Jumbo will be making it to that very top of like, the cylindrical tower and like Jumbo time would be totally running out more and more and Jumbo would be totally uh, like desperately actually totally confused and actually be desperately trying to like figure out a way to like basically to make it back towards that step while holding on to like the baby as well. That would be such an extreme hard task for like Junko at that point it's like scenario that I'm looking for and I'm looking for like Neo by then would be like only succumbing to extreme injuries and then like Neo in getting eliminated in like the Saturday getting eliminated in like the role of like the tournament. Just like the scenario that I'm expecting. So like at that point I'm looking for like Junko to be going through such extreme struggle and would be totally close as to like how to like save like the baby and get and on how to like get the baby to like the very bottom of it out. So definitely at that point I was wondering that by by 5 minutes alone to be like finally remaining for like the definitely I was wondering like that would be most likely a timer for like the self destruction of like the entire things to be in the thing. It's definitely not for so like I'm wondering like by 5 seconds would be remaining for that self-destruction is when and like at that point I was like done so we don't be losing all of the black hope. And I was going it to be at that point that I'm slowly running that the postcards like slowly making it into and encouraging and making it to that exact location that we can have that I'm looking for. Still I'm also point like the postcards at that point that's still running their way into like still managing to like make it to like the very top of like the center tower and like saving jump as well as like the baby and hitting them to the bottom just like in the scenarios that I'm looking and then I'm going like keep being like an intense round for like the postcards as well as like Jumbo and while Jumbo is holding like the baby then the scenario that I'm looking and like I'm bringing them for being having that intense round and that way it's only through like the postcard help like and like Jumbo and like the baby that basically barely managing to that make it out of like the studio building in time and even getting even succeeding like getting at like a safe distance from like the studio building in time as like the studio building would be like self-destructing reflecting the scenario that I'm looking and my book to the end. So like that way like I'm just probably working that Janko being like the one to eventually end up taking care of like Janko's like thought and that way like I'm looking like Janko adopting like Janko's thought and Janko's thought that way going like Janko is next eventual scenario that I'm looking like and I'm looking at. You know, from that after that like I'm from that so I'm creating like I'm looking like Janko almost like they along with that joy that will be going up to that Sanjay that not that basically empty model and basically that the junk of a bit of a thing of that basically that shifting that all of that that's reward money for that Sanjay to proper safe location before like anyone steals it away. So they along the lines that junk of a bit of a thing and basically that way junk over like this story will be going up to that the model of like Sanjay and then looking like and I'm totally putting like at that point like I'm putting like them totally finding that like Sanjon might have totally returned to good and like it might have been something that like Sanjon might have done right before like entering like the 2024 games and chasing after like him and the front man in both and like entering like the 24 games like while they might have been like all while they were all like preparing to like capture like the front man and everything like it might have been during that final phases of that time that like Sanjon might have returned this will because like Sanjon might have considered like the possibility of that basically Sanjon possibly while chasing like the frontman like Sanjon possibly like getting eliminated by along the lines of like a lot of that Sanjon might have seen. So like I'm referring that legend like Sanjon back then had that like had spent like 3 4 years like only solely focused on like capturing like the frontman and everything. So I was bring like that way like before entering like 2024 Squid Game like I'm like Sanjon might have totally left this with and English like it might have been written that like if Sanjon gets like eliminated, then all of that Sanjon asset will be transferred to like Django. Would be along the line should be written and like a note as well would be not like the written that was were like Sanjon like money would be but like it might be written that basically Sanjon might have totally written this like message for like Django that like even if like if by chance like Sanjon doesn't make it, then that Janho has to like continue where like Sanjon has left off would be along the lines of the different like Sanjon might have written that message because like I'm the like after like Janho and Sanjon had met after all those great number of years like once like Sanjon and Janho had met like at that point I'm remember Janho might have by that like might have found out about like studios taking place in like other countries as well. So definitely might be the case, especially when 300. So definitely Janho might have build this all this like information to like Sanjon. So like that way definitely Sanjon from that point of realization itself like Sanjon might have only put in his mind to like totally took only that the bring down of like the games in Sanjon's country to only be like the first step into like eventually bringing down like the against taking the respectable. Would be along the lines like Sanjay might have fixed in his mind even at that point back then it might have been the case definitely well trained. So definitely that that way like I'm looking like Janko what do you think would be over like Janko seeing this message and like Janko that way getting that the message and for like Janko by Sanjay to like to for example, to like not to continue on where like Sangon has left off and basically to target like the studios all across like the world and to like use all of like the wealth of like Sangon to like to make slowly to like bring down like the studios all across like the world would be along the line from the like that message that which will be left at that point. It's like Zambo and the choice would be so many like at like that home in like Sangon to like mortal. It's like doing the scenario that I'm remembering in the frame.